Hey, folks, welcome to InTheMoneyStocks.com's live trading action video. My name is Gareth Soloway, Chief Market Strategist here. Today's date is Tuesday, August 16th, 2016. Well, folks, markets are down slightly on the day. A little bit of concern over the dollar-yen earlier today triggered the gap down. Also a market that obviously is overbought. But if we look at the dollar-yen here, you can see that in the early morning from basically last night, look at this big collapse, and the dollar-yen did bounce back, which helped the markets stem some losses. But we still have trailed off, which has kept the markets a little bit under pressure. You can see a little bounce on the dollar yen now, and we're seeing the spiders bouncing back up. The reason why that's a concern is that ultimately it affects the carry trade, and below 100 on the dollar yen is a big level. That's a big level that has to be noted. Now the spiders again gapped lower. What you notice here on the SPY trade is if we zoom out and we take the pivot low going back from early August and connect it to the pivot right here around August 10th through August 12th or so, notice that trend line. And notice how today's gap down, we opened right there below that area. So that right away told me personally that markets were going to be under a little bit of pressure today. Now the volume has remained light. 37 million with about an hour left to go is ridiculously light. But again, you still see a little bit of weakness here. Markets just made a low, but again, interestingly enough, right around 2 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time, markets are getting a little bit of a bid. If you go back to previous days that we were down, notice right here, the same bid. Notice right over here, same bid. So any day where the markets have been under a little bit of pressure, you're getting this late day right here. Look at this, little bid, and right here, little bid. So very interesting to note that, and I believe it's more of a buy the dip mentality. Also a little short covering going on. When the volume's very light, shorts can very easily, when they cover, affect the markets to the upside, right? Because when you cover a short, you have to buy the stock. So it appears that that's going on. And I also think that there's generally this bias of, every little dip late in the day, buy it because the next day most likely will be up. One day that won't work, but it's worked lately. So you got to, continue to say and understand that the markets are doing what they are and, trade it until it doesn't work, essentially. Anyways, bottom line is that's interesting today. Markets did tag this little bit of an upsloping trend line. If I zoom out here, folks, again, you can see it's this former head and shoulders pattern. Here was your shoulder, head, shoulder. So the neckline went from this point to this point. And if you extend that out, you actually go right to the low of today, which is kind of interesting as well. Okay, so markets, again, most likely will end the day slightly lower on very light volume. The big question is, does it continue tomorrow, or do we see just a slow float back up to the upside? Couple stocks catching my eye today. Apple. All right, Apple's getting a little bounce here, but virtually flat on the day. If you look at the daily chart, it hit a master level gap fill here. Look at the extension move here. All right, this stock is going to pull back. And in fact, yesterday after the bell, news hit that Warren Buffett had increased his stake substantially in Apple through Berkshire Hathaway. Now, what's important about that is that the stock was as high as above 110 today. It has since fallen back down, was just recently negative, but has bounced back to the flat line or slightly positive, up 16 cents. If news from Warren Buffett like that, obviously he had bought months ago probably, but the point is usually the stock will get a bigger bounce. The fact that it's not getting a bounce, especially that it coincides with a technical level here, this tells me that you're going to get a pullback here on the Apple chart. Now, my expectation is probably a target pullback somewhere in this vicinity. Two moving averages, a gap window, and a little pivot point here. So somewhere around the 105 to 104 level would be the appropriate target range for a pullback. All right, so we'll keep an eye on that. A couple other charts that I'm keeping an eye on. Goldman Sachs today, it's rallying up a little bit of green action, but notice again it's getting very close to this pivot area top. So I think financials are getting very interesting for a pullback area. That's going to be something to watch. And also, if you take a look at the GLD today, GLD is up 84 cents. So it's not a great day on GLD on gold, but it's a little upside. But again, notice that you're seeing a lot of struggling going on the GDX. GDX is virtually flat, not seeing gains like it usually does. So that's another little thing that's catching my eye. Tells me that GDX most likely is going to head down. Another thing that I wanted to point out to you guys here, there's a great trend line that's been developing along the chart here of the IWM. So if you look here, these little pivot tops, this pivot top, and all along here, how it's bumping up against that. Notice how yesterday you tried to break out above it, and today you're reversing back under it. To me, that also is a little bit of something that I pay attention to, and I say to myself, okay, just be aware that at some point you're going to fall. I mean, if it's bumping up against this and it can't break through, eventually path of least resistance is down. And what's interesting here is you can make a case that you have this trend line right here, right, which kind of is parallel, right? So you have this line here and this line here almost parallel to each other on a sharp upsloping trend, which tells me that if the IWM starts to break down substantially, you're going to go to this lower level right in here. So, I mean, there's actually a fair amount of downside if the IWM decides to break lower, and that's something that we're watching for a trigger on as well. Very interesting little aspect there. So there's lots of stuff to watch here, folks. Markets, again, as they trade, are getting more and more intriguing. Various technical levels taking hits, but not necessarily because the volume's so light. We're not seeing a major reaction to it. Again, I'm watching the spiders today to see where we close. Just the fact that you're below this upsloping trend line of the spiders, which I talked about at the beginning of the video, in a normal market, you should see over the next few days a fall to this pivot point here around the 217 and a quarter level, and really all the way down to 216.50. 216.50, which should be an obvious target. Now, the only issue is the volume is so light, the markets are having a lot of trouble seeing follow through. Very much trouble. So that's something that I'll be following up as well, and we'll be talking about that in the Research Center and the nightly analysis videos and so forth. Bottom line is, good stuff. I picked up some new trades in the Research Center today. Very good setups, and again, we will continue to rock it. Take care. Come join us here. Take the 7-day free trial to In the Money Stocks.